Hey, read through the word. Today is March 24th, and today's lesson, now hold on with me right here, okay? Today's lesson is named Over the River and Through the Woods. So, I'm all about a good title. I tell my students all the time when they turn in a paper to me, I said, I expect you to get creative with your title. With research papers, I've got a group of students starting research papers. We started working on knowing the difference between different types of sources on the internet, whether they're like .com, .org, .net, those type of things. Excuse me, today. And then tomorrow we will start scholarly research and how to access scholarly databases and look at journals and those type of things, and knowing the difference between primary, secondary, and tertiary sources. And but I always say a title. I said, you remember that Mrs. Nance has a lot of papers to read and grade. So you want to hook me from the beginning, and a good title does it. So I'm trying to get you with a good title. And do what I tell my students. Let's get a good title. So, let's talk about this. We're going to read Joshua 9, 1 through 15. And I'm concentrating on verses 14 and 15. But let's go back through and read this. It says, Now, all the kings west of the Jordan River heard about what had happened. These were the kings of the Hittites, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites, who lived in the hill country, in the western foothills, and along the coast of the Mediterranean Sea, as far north as the Lebanon mountains. These kings combined their armies to fight as one against Joshua and the Israelites. But when the people of Gibeon heard what Joshua had done to Jericho and Ai, they resorted to deception to save themselves. They sent ambassadors to Joshua, loading their donkeys with weathered saddlebags and old patched wineskins. And they put on worn out patched sandals and ragged clothes. And the bread they took with them was dry and moldy. And when they arrived at their camp of Israel at Gilgal, they told Joshua and the men of Israel, We have come from a distant land to ask you to make a peace treaty with us. The Israelites replied to these Hivites, How do we know that you don't live nearby? For if you do, we cannot make a treaty with you. They replied, We are your servants. But who are you? Where do you come from? And they answered, Your servants have come from a very distant country. We have heard of the might of the Lord your God and all he did in Egypt. We have also heard what he did to the two Amorite kings east of the Jordan River, which is called the Transjordan area. King Sihon of Heshbon and King Og of Bashan, who lived in Ashtoreth. So our elders and our people instructed us, take supplies for a long journey. Go meet with the people of Israel and tell them, we are your servants. Please make a treaty with us. This bread was hot from the ovens when we left our homes. But now you can see it is dry and moldy. These wineskins were new when we filled them, but they are old and split open. And our clothing and sandals are worn out from our very long journey. So the Israelites examined their food, but they did not consult the Lord. And then Joshua made a peace treaty with them and guaranteed their safety. And the leaders of the community ratified their agreement with a binding oath. Yes. So, the reason I'm calling it Over the River and Through the Woods is, well, that's basically what the Gibeonites are saying. Yeah, we live over the river and through the woods, way, way far away. So, let's talk about it. Okay, so God has promised to bless all nations on the earth through Israel. And Israel has now entered into the promised land. Now we're entering, and we'll talk more about this tomorrow, but we entered the first place, Jericho. And by the time the fighting, the battle starts, so AI and everything. So, remember when we were in, Deuteronomy? No, it was Numbers. When we were in Numbers and like blinked and like 38 years passed by in a couple chapters. This is not like, this takes about a year. This is a 7-year process. So, they've started this. And now they're going to fulfill the plan to possess the land that the Lord has given them and drive out the inhabitants. And we'll talk more about that tomorrow too. People have heard and they have a plan. Now, I had 2 different ways to go with this lesson. I'm going to go this way. I was trying to add and it became too long a lesson. So I've told y'all before, I tend to, when I sit and write a lesson and study, I end up with an hour's worth of material that I end up like, okay, what can I get rid of? So I'm going to give you a few little ideas and let you go chase these things down. Because number one, remembering that the purpose is that Israel will be basically a light to other nations. And through them, the world will be blessed. Now, these are a Gentile people. And I want, if you would look and see similar, we're repeating another story from a Gentile person that used deception, but for Israel's purposes, not against Israel. And so, if you would look at this story and lay it out beside the story of Rahab back in Jericho, let's look at those 2 stories, and you'll see a lot of similarities and God's desire to reach the Gentile people, because they both talk about, we've heard about your God, we're fear. We know what he said will be true, and we can't stop it, so we want to be on your side. Now, Rahab worked differently, but it's the same idea, because they've heard and they believe that what God has said is true. So go read Rahab, read this, and then that's go back a few chapters. Where are we? We're in 9. Go back a few chapters in Joshua, and you'll get the story of Rahab. Joshua 4, I believe. And or is it 4 or 6? Let's look. Hold on. Sometimes when I go off the top of my head, I tell you the wrong thing. So let's double check that. Four is when they cross the Jordan. And it is 4 and 6. So it is 4 and 6. So right through there, 4 through 6. Read through there. Because first they go in, talk to her, and then they come in the whole walk around, and she's saved. So go look at that. And see if you not see some similarities in that story. And there's a reason that Joshua is telling us that. But we don't have time to talk about it all today. So, they have a plan. So the Gibeonites have come over the river and through the woods. Or so they say. They're from just around the corner. I almost titled this lesson Over Yonder. Nice southern thing there. Well, over yonder, but over yonder can be pretty close. If I have to explain that to you. But over the river and through the woods, it's a hike. So there's they knew that Israel had a purpose in what they say when they come, and when he tells us about the planning. They knew that Israel's purpose was to come in and drive out the inhabitants. They knew that God was on their side. They knew all of these things. And they knew that God had done on their behalf. They knew that Israel would destroy them and their gods, which was the point. And they had to find a way to trick them into a treaty. Otherwise, they would be one of the people groups driven out. And so they decided they had done their work. They knew a lot, and they knew they couldn't be in a treaty with them. But it was an elaborate deception. Old wineskins, old worn out clothes, old bread. So it made it look like they came from over the river and through the woods instead of just down the street. There were no streets, but you know what I mean. But the deception went hard, and this is why it worked. And this is the danger of the whole thing. It worked because Israel did not consult God. Israel thought they didn't need to ask God. This is an easy deception. All these people are from over the river and through the woods. They're not any of the ites that are living in this land. We can make a treaty with them, and this will be fine. So the eating of the bread and having the meal together is what makes this treaty. And then 3 days later, they find out, oops, you're not from over the river and through the woods. You're from just down the street. So you lied, but we've already made the covenant. We can't go back on it. So the danger in this is that, this is an easy decision. We don't even need to ask God about that. They could do it on their own. I tell my students all the time that much of the discussions I have with them are me saving them from a lot of what I did wrong in life, which is how it works with older people and younger people. We're trying to impart wisdom or lessons learned. And I think this is a big one for us. One of them asked me today, or was it yesterday? I think it was yesterday. We were having a discussion. Our verse this week is Colossians 3, 8 and 9 is our verses. And so I had 2 whiteboards up. This was actually my English class, and we were discussing the verses and what old self and new self looked like. And, how do we keep from doing that? And they asked me, when I met my husband and we started dating, my husband was not a Christian. I was. And they're like, Miss Nance, you shouldn't have dated him. I said, I know that. I said, I'm not recommending this anything, but I said, you know what? Did I consult the Lord? No, I got this. He's a really good guy. And I said, honestly, one of the first conversations I had with him was, where do you go to church? And he said, well, a neighbor takes me to, and there was a church. And I was like, oh, that's a great church. I know their pastor. And, that's as deep as that conversation got. And then, we started attending my home church, and, he was saved and baptized before we were married. But I think of all the things going, oh, I got this, God. I don't need to consult you, that I've done in my life. And the disasters that come out of it, that was not a disaster. That was next to accepting the Lord Jesus as my Savior. My husband is the next best decision. He is a fantastic and godly man. And, but it could have worked out differently. And I think about that, about how I did not take Proverbs 3, 5, and 6 to heart. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make your path straight. Trust the Lord. He will direct your path. Israel didn't do that. They trusted their own decision and thought, we don't need to consult God. And I think that's our big lesson here. We don't want to be that. So we'll see you next time on Read Through the Word.